Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. GMOs, genetically modified organisms. The battle for unfucked with food rages on, and before we head to the front lines of this fight, let me just take a moment to dig into the science. And also some controversy, because GMOs have garnered support from science heavyweights like Neil deGrasse Tyson, the American Association for Advancement of Science, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, and others. Meanwhile, organizations like the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Global Research Institute, the Council for Responsible Genetics, and scientists such as Vandana Shiva, who was named one of the 7 most powerful women in the world, and Dr. Gilles-Éric Seralini, the first scientist to do a long-term GMO toxicity study not sponsored and funded by the corporations themselves, and many others, are all against GMOs. And unlike climate change, the scientific community isn't 97% on board with this one. Why? Why is this such a splintered subject? Well, as Sheldon Krimsky, the nation's leading advocate of ethics and science, puts it, the real and potentially adverse effects of GMOs have been understated or negated by many in the scientific community who accept uncritically a corporate-crafted message. A fair-minded and unbiased individual looking at all of the evidence must reach the conclusion that there is a great deal that we do not know, and what we do know impels us to be both cautious and concerned, skeptical of an early manufactured consensus and critical of a framing that fails to recognize the diversity of public objections to GMOs. A bit like the egg debate. Are they good? Are they bad? Who knows? But unlike the egg debate, we don't have a lot of independent studies on GMOs. In fact, the aforementioned Dr. Seralini is the first person to lead a team in an independent study on the toxicity of GMOs. And he released his findings in 2012, more than 2 decades after GMOs started commercially appearing in the marketplace. What Seralini and his team did was take a 2004 Monsanto study of NK603 maize, one of Monsanto's GMO corn crops. And while the experiment was based on the same protocol as the Monsanto study, Seralini's team tested more parameters more frequently and for a longer period of time. Instead of the 90 days in the Monsanto study, Seralini's rats were tested for their full 2-year lifespan. And that last detail proved critical. The first tumors only appeared 4 to 7 months into the study. In industry's earlier 90-day study on the same GMO maize, Monsanto NK603, signs of toxicity were seen but were dismissed as, quote, not biologically meaningful by industry and European Food Safety Administration, EFSA, alike. It seems that they were indeed very biologically meaningful. The Seralini study findings go on to show that all the female rats who were fed GMO corn died 2 to 3 times faster than the control group rats who weren't on GMOs. And that difference was seen in 3 male rat groups. Females developed large mammary and pituitary tumors. Hormone balances were completely thrown off, while males experienced liver congestions and necrosis. And before you say, well, that certainly does suck for that rat family, but I'm not a fucking rat, that is true. However, rats, mice, and indeed other rodents as well are widely used in scientific testing because, quote, their genetic, biological, and behavior characteristics closely resemble those of humans. And many symptoms of human conditions can be replicated in mice and rats. So, now that that argument is cleared up, let's get back to the study. And I should perhaps also mention that Seralini had to work his ass off just to be able to do this study. In order to replicate the study, Seralini had to, of course, obtain the original study from Monsanto, which is about as easy and enjoyable as trying to extract your hand from the jaws of an embittered crocodile. And yet, he did. And not only did he do that, he then published his findings post-peer review in a highly, highly respected international journal. The response? A series of U.S. and corporate-backed cover-ups attempting to debunk his science in the name of Monsanto's science. Just a few weeks after Seralini released his findings, the EFSA released their own little press plug, claiming that GMOs are just fine, shut up, and go back to your life. In so many words. Corporate watchdog group, Corporate Europe Observer, summarily smelled a rat. Pun intended. After doing a little bit of their own digging, they found that, quote, over half of the scientists involved in the GMO panel, which positively reviewed the Monsanto's study for GMO maize in 2009, leading to its EU-wide authorization, had conflicts of interest with the biotech industry. And these conflicts ranged from receiving research funding from the biotech industry, being a member or collaborator in a pro-biotech industry association, to writing or reviewing industry-sponsored publications. Some conflicts revealed a conflict of scientific interests, with some panel members involved in working on the creation of transgenic plants, including potatoes, with antibiotic-resistant marker genes. Gosh, that sounds really shady, and it sounds shady in the same way that meeting that happened in 1992 or something, where George Bush I met with top officials of Monsanto in a closed-door meeting, after which he gave GMO seeds the commercial green light and mandated that no government safety tests be conducted before the release. Now, why would he do that? Granted, that whole family seems to be allergic to science and, intelligence in general, but for the rest of the scientific community, why aren't such findings such as Seralini's at least taken into consideration when people call out their support for GMOs? I actually don't have an answer to that. I don't know. Could it be that people get stuck in the mire of good intentions? I mean, the concept of scientifically engineered drought-resistant crops that could feed millions sounds pretty fucking great. And so does being fit without exercise, but there's just no science to suggest that either one of those work. Indeed, the claim that GMOs result in higher crop yields is not true, because that was one of the original ideas. Hey, we'll create this drought-resistant, pesticide-resistant crop, and then everybody can eat more. World hunger solved. But no. A 2013 study showed evidence of what is known as yield drag, the idea that manipulating the genome of a plant variety causes unintended changes in the way that it grows, causing it to be actually less productive. And furthermore, soils managed with organic methods have shown better water holding capacity and water infiltration rates and have produced higher yields than conventional systems under drought conditions and excessive rainfall. Oh, the irony. But I'm not done yet. How about the scientific claim that GMOs are good for the environment because they require less herbicides? The idea being that with GMO crops resistant to herbicides such as Roundup, aka glyphosate, you could spritz just, a smaller amount of weed killer on the crops, kill the weeds, and spare the crops. But that's not quite how it worked out. Beginning around 2000, weeds growing in Roundup-ready crops began to develop resistance to Roundup. And by 2011, 8 agriculturally important weeds in the U.S. had developed glyphosate resistance associated with Roundup-ready crops. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you have to spray more shit. Actually, an estimated 383 million pounds worth of shit. On top of this, some farmers are attempting to plow the problem out, resulting in increased soil erosion, thereby debunking the two main quote-unquote sustainability benefits for the Roundup-ready crops, which are lower overall use of herbicide and a reduction in soil erosion. And keep in mind that the soil erosion, now filled with millions of pounds more worth of glyphosate, brought to you by the makers of Agent Orange, are flowing into rivers, tributaries, seeping into groundwater, and of course, affecting crops that aren't supposed to be a part of the Roundup-ready system. And all this might explain why farmers used to dress like this, and now dress like this. Sorry, but if you have to get dressed like that to pick fucking crops, I think I'll just sit over here and gnaw on my fucking houseplant. But even with all of this, all of these red flags popping up like whack-a-moles on PCP, many anti-GMO activists are primarily after something so simple and far less controversial than an all-out ban: labeling. I mean, arsenic is labeled arsenic, right? So, sugar-free. So if you see it, you know not to drink that shit. But GMO corporations and our government don't want us to know which veggies were plucked via hazmat suit, which logic, the friend of science, would consider to be silly if they could really stand by their own in-house funded experiments that show that GMOs are as safe for you as mother's milk. And an aside on that, lots of infant formula is GMO. Just a heads up. Furthermore, GMO companies and their cheerleaders claim that labels aren't needed because they'll just confuse consumers. Question. How the fuck is this confusing? If you don't think that this will confuse us, but that will, then you must think that we are the most intelligent dumb fucks ever to grace this topsy-turvy world. I can't even fucking say most of those words, and yet Big Ag thinks I'm intelligent enough to decide that yes, dipotassium phosphate is exactly what I want for dinner. But GMOs, I'm sorry, I'm so confused. I think I'll just starve. Fuck you. In the end, it's very, very clear that the industry is doing one hell of a job of covering up their own meager experiments while simultaneously spending tons of cash to ensure that no one else can perform studies, that governments close their eyes, open their mouths, and that consumers keep reading 4-syllable words but steer clear of 3-letter words for our own safety and happiness. And those are the facts as of today. And that's enough to make me anti-GMO. As someone who loves science, who respects the tenets of always questioning, always being open to learn and to adjust my own understanding of the world based on new findings, I am anti-GMO. And I will be until science can prove that I should bite into what these guys are harvesting. As Counterpunch reported late last year, as of now, GMOs do nothing for society but enlarge the coffers of the billion-dollar agrochemical giants who produce them. They have not alleviated hunger. They have not increased environmental sustainability. Their much-hyped public benefits have not yet materialized. To question their scientific and societal value and risk is decidedly scientific at its core. At the very least, the public has a right to know what is in the food they eat. Anything else would be an infringement on the rights of all U.S. citizens, and most of all, would be in and of itself anti-science. And that is why I will, and I urge you to as well, march against Monsanto this Saturday, May 21st. This is a march against corporate malfeasance, against corporate lies, the buying of our elected officials, the poisoning of our people and planet, and the bastardization of the name of science into a belief that technology is always right, and that what we concoct is better than what nature concocts, that what we create is science, and that what the planet has spent billions of years creating is not. This is, in other words, a march for science, the science of how we might live with, not destroy nature. This is a march for truth, for our rights and the rights of the planet. To learn more about the march and to find one that's happening in your area, visit marchagainstmonsanto.com with dashes.